right. Well, it's good to see all of you this morning. We're in a four-part series for the month of July entitled What If, where we are asking the question, what if Jesus was really serious when he said some of the kind of harder teachings that he spoke to his disciples, to the crowds that were listening, and as we read them today, to us as well. And for this month, we have, I forgot to introduce this last week, we've got a new bookmark. If you use this bookmark in your small group or maybe in a discipleship conversation with somebody, these are great guides to some of those conversations. We've also redesigned the back of the bookmark just a little bit, or the front, depending on how you take it. And we are getting you to, instead of just thinking about 7 or 8 specific things and clustering them up that way, we've got it broken down into 3 sections that'll maybe make these studies go a little bit more smoothly, a little bit easier. So we're always looking to make things better if we can. Grab yourself one of these bookmarks on the way out today if you're using them again in your small group, just your personal study, or maybe a discipleship conversation that you're having with someone. Well, again, we're asking the question this month, what if Jesus was serious about some of the things that he said? Some of the things that sometimes we look at and we say, well, those are difficult, so I'm not sure he was serious. It's hard to understand, so I'm not sure if he really could have been serious about that. There's a whole lot of reasons why we might look at that and say, I'm not sure if Jesus was serious. I can remember a moment in my life where I had one of those moments where a teacher of mine in 6th grade said something, and I thought to myself, is she serious? Actually, what I thought was more like this. I thought, she can't be serious about this. See, I'd come from 5th grade into 6th grade, and in 6th grade, I entered into a gifted and talented program. Now, I don't know why in the world they thought I needed to be in a gifted and talented program, but here I was anyway. And so I remember the first day of school with Miss Richards, and Miss Richard was our English composition teacher. And Miss Richards said, on the first day of school, class, this year you're going to learn to write. I'm like, well, I know how to learn. I mean, I know how to write. You're going to learn to write. What she really meant was, we're going to learn really how to write. And the way that she was going to do that was she was going to assign us an essay the first day of school. And I'm thinking, the first day of school, an essay? All we do when we come back the first day of school is hang out with all the friends we haven't seen for the summer. You're on the wrong page here, teacher. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what the first day of school is really all about. But she said, no, I'm going to assign you an essay the first day of school. And then she went on to say, and we're going to write 2 or 3 of these every week so that you really learn to write. And I'm thinking, there's no way she's serious about that. 2 or 3 essays a week. I mean, in 5th grade, maybe to close out a semester, you might write an essay. And here is this teacher saying, we're going to write 2 or 3 essays every week. And I thought to myself, she has to be joking. She has to be kidding. This is the, start them off hard and then get soft with them as the year goes on kind of philosophy, right? And the fact that I was no longer in the gifted and talented program in 7th grade showed that I really believed for that whole year that Miss Richards was joking. I thought she was kidding. There was no way she could be serious about that, but Miss Richards was completely serious. She had us write 2 or 3 essays every week so that we could learn to write. And I may have written one of those or so every week. The reality is there are times in life where somebody says something and you wonder, are they serious? I mean, is that a joke? It's hard to understand. I can't get my mind around it. It's maybe too difficult, so they can't actually be serious. And the reality is that sometimes we have that with some of Jesus' words. Well, real quick, I want to review last week, and then we'll jump into this week's message. Last week, as we were in Matthew 5, and we read this section that is a tough section for us on the fact that Jesus says, listen, if you've got hate in your heart towards a brother, it's kind of like killing him. Whoa, is he serious? And so we asked out of last week's message, we said, what if Jesus was serious when he asked us to love each other? Because really that's what Jesus is getting at is, listen, it's so important that you love each other in a truly radical way that the kind of anger that you have in your heart towards somebody else that looks like hate or that might lead in an extreme case to actually taking the life of another, that kind of anger has no room in the life of a disciple. And that the kind of love that Jesus wants us to have for each other means there's no room for that kind of anger in the life of a disciple of Jesus. And that's a hard teaching. Because again, the reality is that most of us have never taken somebody else's life, but we've all been at the place where we've been really angry with somebody. I mean, so angry that we might have thought, I wish they weren't here anymore. It's kind of like that scene in Home Alone early on. I remember that scene well because I had that thought about my family sometimes too, where Kevin thinks to himself, what would happen if my family just disappeared? I'm angry at him. What would happen if the whole family just disappeared? And of course, he wakes up the next morning and his whole family's gone, and he spends the rest of these few days apart from his family realizing, I don't want my family to be gone, and so it teaches him how to love. But what if that kind of thing happened to us? Every time we were angry with somebody, again, I said last week, if you're angry with somebody, so angry with somebody that you're embittered toward them, you've got rage toward them, and your anger toward them really, really killed them. But we'd realize pretty quickly the consequences of having that type of anger, right? Even though it's hard to understand. And so the challenge out of last week, and the challenge for this whole message series is this. If you trust Jesus, listen to him, even when his teachings are difficult or seem to turn your world upside down. So if you trust Jesus, if you follow Jesus, now remember, in this Sermon on the Mount that Jesus preaches, what Matthew tells us is that there was a big crowd gathering, and we often think that what happened is that Jesus got up on the mountain so that he could address the whole crowd. But what Matthew actually tells us is that at least it looks like Jesus went up on the mountain to kind of get away from the crowd and address his disciples. Now, probably the crowd followed. But the reality is Jesus wanted to have a conversation with the disciples about what it meant to really follow him, about what it looked like to live a life dedicated to him, about what it looked like if they were to trust him and listen to him, even when his teachings were difficult or seemed to turn their world upside down. And so again, that's why this message series has so much for us, because we're here, I assume most of us are here this morning because we've made a choice to trust Jesus. Or you may be here this morning and you haven't made the choice to trust and follow Jesus, but you're at least exploring that. You're giving it some thought. You're wondering, should I follow? Should I trust Jesus? And so I think we would have been among the crowd that Jesus would have said, hey, come with me up onto this mountain. And let's have a conversation about what it looks like to really trust and follow me in a radical way. Let's have this conversation. And so that's what we're doing for this month, as we often do in the month of July. We talk about discipleship, or we focus on discipleship. And so for this whole month, we are part of the crowd that Jesus says, hey, come with me on this mountain, and I'm going to teach you some things. They're going to be hard. They're going to look even radical at times. They may flip your world upside down sometimes. But I'm telling you, it's worth it to live like this. And today we'll be reminded again as we close this message out, 2 reasons why it's worth it, even when this is difficult, even when we don't understand, even when we wonder, could he really have been serious when he said this? Right? So Jesus begins most of the text that we're going to look at this month with this statement, you've heard it said, or you've heard the commandment. You're familiar with this old commandment, but let me give you the heart behind the commandment. So Jesus begins this section by saying this. You've heard the commandment. This is Matthew 5, 27 through 32. You've heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery. You've heard that commandment, Jesus said. It's part of the 10 commandments. So you've heard this commandment, he says to his disciples. You've heard this commandment. And just as Jesus said last week, but I'm going to tell you something more about this. Jesus said last week, you've heard the commandment, don't commit murder. But I'm going to tell you that if you've got anger in your heart towards another believer, we've got an issue we got to work with. So what do you think Jesus is going to do this week? He says this, but I say, anyone, and again, remember he's talking to his male disciples, but this goes both ways, no matter what gender you are, right? But I say anyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Then Jesus goes on to say this, so if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your hand, even your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. Again, Jesus says it's better for you to lose one part of your body than for the whole body to be thrown into hell. Then Jesus goes on to say this, you've heard that the law says, a man can divorce his wife by merely giving her a written notice of divorce. But I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless she has been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman also commits adultery. Now, what can we say about this difficult text, this very difficult teaching? Now, I said last week, if it's uncomfortable for you to hear these words, just imagine standing up on the stage and having to say them, right? These are uncomfortable teachings. They're difficult teachings. I think the fact that they're so difficult for us points something out, however. We look at this and we think this is so radical, but Jesus looks at this and he says, no, this is just the way the world's supposed to be, actually. The vision that I'm casting for you and calling you into, this is how the world's supposed to be. We're supposed to be these pure kind of people. That's how God created us, sinless. So here's what we're supposed to be. The fact that these teachings seem so difficult shows just how far we've drifted from the people God created us to be. Less drift, less difficult. The more drift, the more difficult these teachings are to live out, right? So we've drifted from the people that God created us to be. And so, of course, these teachings look radical and difficult for us. So what can we learn from what Jesus says? The first thing is this, that Jesus takes sin more seriously than most of us do. I mean, when you read this teaching, what I see very clearly is that Jesus takes sin more seriously than I do. He absolutely does. He says, listen, if you've got a problem with lust, I want you to take it this seriously. You'd be willing to lose a part of your body to win the battle over lust. Now, Jesus did use hyperbole sometimes. And so when we're asking this question, what if Jesus was serious? Was he this serious? There was a guy in the 2nd century named Origen who thought Jesus was that serious. And so he followed Jesus up on what Jesus said. I think there are times when Jesus uses hyperbole. Let me give you just a couple of examples. When Jesus says, if you want to follow me, you got to hate your family to follow me. Does Jesus want any of us to hate our families? No. I mean, that would go completely counter to the teaching of God to love each other, to take care of our families. Jesus doesn't want you to hate your family, but he is saying, in comparison to the love that you have for me, everything else should be so second place that there is no comparison. So you love me that deeply, to the point that people will feel like, wait a minute, you're going to put Jesus over me? I'm your family. Yes, if Jesus asks me to do this and you ask me to do something counter, I'm always choosing Jesus. So there will be time where your family will feel like, wait a minute, I don't understand this. If you love me, you do this. I can't do that because I love Jesus. So Jesus says, if you want to follow me, it's got to seem like you hate your family at times. That's a hard teaching. But it's hyperbole as well to some degree. Or how about this one? Jesus says that it's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom than it is for a camel to go through the eye of the needle. I think Jesus was intentionally kind of playing with the crowd a little bit to get them going, to capture their attention and say, hey, let me tell you something. Here's something that's really difficult. You ever seen a camel go through the eye of a needle? And everybody's thinking, that's ridiculous. I've never seen a camel go through the eye of a needle. And then all of a sudden they're starting to understand what Jesus is saying. Wait a minute, a camel can't go through the eye of a needle. Then wait a minute, are you saying that a rich person can't enter the kingdom of heaven? In fact, that's kind of what his disciples say. Well, then who can be in heaven? Who can be part of the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus says, all right, here's the truth. What's impossible with human beings is possible with God. And so Jesus did not mean that rich people can't enter the kingdom of God. It just means that rich people need God if they have any chance of entering the kingdom of God. It means that we all need God. If we have any chance of being with God, bottom line, we all need God. And sometimes it's hard for rich people to notice how needy they truly are. I mean, that's true, and that's convicting for a lot of us in this room because we are wealthier than just about all of the rest of the world. We need God. I need God. You need God. My point is that Jesus sometimes does use hyperbole. But what we can't miss is this truth, that Jesus takes sin very seriously. Jesus takes sin very seriously. The second thing that I think we see in this text is this, is that Jesus takes commitment more seriously than most of us do. We're going to look at this in one of the later messages in this series as well, so we're not going to go into this too far, but Jesus is talking specifically about the commitments that are made when we say I do to each other in this sense. And the reality is that the commitments that we make when we say I do mirror a relationship that God has with us when we say I do to him. And so there's a lot involved in this for Jesus. Our marriages on this earth are intended to reflect the love that God has for us. Jesus takes commitment more seriously than many of us do. There was a study that came out in 2008 that said that nearly 50% of all marriages wind up in divorce. Now, fortunately, that study was redone and we found that it wasn't quite that bad. It wasn't quite that bad, but it was somewhere close to 40%. Out of that initial study, there was the assertion that Christian marriages, nearly 50% of all Christian marriages end up in divorce as well. And what we found when that study was done again is that, thank God, there is a difference between Christian marriages and marriages of those who are not Christ followers. Roughly 40% of all those who are not Christ followers, again, their marriages do end in divorce. It was somewhere around 23 or 24% for Christians, so close to a 50% reduction. So that's something to at least say, hey, that's positive. But the reality is you and I are still subject to the brokenness of this world, even when we follow Jesus. And sometimes, especially when we follow Jesus, we're going to be the ones that Satan comes after. And when Satan comes after us, how seriously do we take the commitments that we've made? Jesus takes commitment more seriously than most of us do. And the third thing I see in this passage is that Jesus was willing to go further to avoid sin and keep his commitments than I am. A lot of times when I'm facing a temptation, when I lose, it's when I've decided, well, it's too difficult. That one's just too difficult, or it's not practical right now. It's just not practical to do that. I get on the highway and I need to be somewhere by a certain time, and the next thing you know, I'm doing a lot more than I'm supposed to be doing. And I've got this conviction that comes that, wait, I'm kind of breaking the law right now. But I need to be there by such and such time. And that's just a small example that shows how we rationalize things. And we say, well, that doesn't make sense. If I didn't want to be late, maybe I should have gotten up a little earlier, right? And if I took sin really seriously and I said, well, that's a half-hour trip, and I remembered that Atlanta traffic is terrible, right? I would have said, well, maybe it's a 40-minute trip, and I don't want to do something that breaks the law, so I'm going to get up 10 minutes earlier. I'm going to go a little bit further to keep myself away from that temptation. And again, that's just a small example. We can go so much further with that, right? But what we see is that Jesus is urging his disciples to go further in avoiding sin and to go deeper in keeping their commitments. Jesus is calling them to something much more. Like I already said, we're going to say this quite a few times during this message series, because this is what it comes down to. If you trust Jesus, listen to him. Even when his teachings are difficult or seem to turn your world upside down, listen to him. If you trust Jesus when your marriage isn't going well, are you going to fight for it? Or are you going to give up? Boy, that's a hard question, right? Here's the truth. For anybody who's a newlywed in this room this morning, we all go through rough patches. I mean, really rough patches. Lori and I haven't always gotten along. I mean, she's not the easiest person in the world to get along with. Wait, what do you mean? No, we all know the truth. I'm not the easiest person. I can say that because she's not here this morning. We all know the truth. I'm not the easiest person to get along with. I make things difficult. And we're both human beings, and we're both broken, and we both have our own issues, and marriage is not the easiest thing in the world at times. But how seriously do we take Jesus' words? How far am I willing to go to fight for what sometimes is broken? Now, Jesus does say there are some circumstances in which reconciliation may not be possible. So Jesus says, he goes there. There are some circumstances, some unfaithfulnesses in which reconciliation may not be possible. But if I trust Jesus, am I going to listen to him, even when his teachings are difficult or seem to turn my world upside down? Now, I think there are two reasons that Jesus addresses these specific issues. Two reasons, and I'm going to give you those real quick, and this is going to be where we're going to land the plane in the next couple of minutes. I think there are two reasons, again, why Jesus addresses these two specific issues. For the first, we're going to rewind just a little bit in the Sermon on the Mount. And I want you to see what Jesus says in Matthew 5:8. Okay, in Matthew 5:8, Jesus makes this incredible promise. He says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. See, Jesus is not content with just addressing the outside. He's got to address the inside because he knows it's our inside that will keep us from seeing God, both in this life and in the next to come. I think there's a truth here that the state of my heart can create a barrier that limits my ability to see God. The state of my heart can create a barrier that limits my ability to see God. So what if Jesus never spoke to that? I mean, what if Jesus knew about us, that the state of our hearts could create a barrier that limits our ability to see God, and he never said anything about it? Well, that wouldn't be love. Because there's nothing better in life than being able to see God and to know God and have an ongoing relationship with him. And so what if Jesus said, well, it's too hard, and I know this teaching is probably going to drive some people away. And so maybe I'll just keep my mouth shut about this one. Well, all along he knew that what's in our hearts is often what keeps us from being able to commune richly with God. We talked about this last week, so we're not going to labor it, but I want you to see this again because this is why Jesus is addressing all these things. You've heard it said, here's the outward, but I'm going to tell you about the inward. Because here's the truth about God. People judge by outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. So God's not concerned only about my sinful actions, but he's concerned as well about my sinful heart. So that's why Jesus has to address these things. So that's the first reason. He has to address these things because he's concerned about the state of our hearts, knowing that it is the thing that will keep us sometimes from communing with God, being able to have a real relationship with him. But the second, and this is also from earlier in the Sermon on the Mount, and we touched on this a little bit last week, and I just want to summarize it this way. The world needs some salty salt and a few bright lights. See, Jesus has this discussion with his disciples early on in the Sermon on the Mount about salt and light. And about salt, he says, listen, you know what salt is supposed to do. Salt works as a preservative, and salt flavors things. Now, I remember I made this trip with a few of my buddies when we lived in Florida. We went down to the Keys. Awesome trip. We'd been planning for this for a while. We'd thought about everything we needed to pack. We went out fishing the first day, and we came back in, and we'd caught grouper, and we'd caught mahi-mahi, and we were excited to eat. And it was late in the evening. And as we went, my fault, by the way, as we went to look for our spices, we realized I'd forgotten the spices. And so we thought, you know what? Grouper is grouper. I mean, you fry up a quality fish like that. We weren't frying it. You grill up a quality fish like that, and it's going to be fantastic. And what was bizarre, we all looked around at each other after eating that and said, that wasn't so good, was it? Which was wild. But it points out the reality that spices or salt add flavor in a way that we need to flavor this world around us, or preserve this world around us, however you look at that. And Jesus also says, look, the reality is this world needs some light in the darkness. And so I'm calling you to something much deeper, much bigger than the standards that you would set for yourself. I'm calling you to go deeper in that. And so what Jesus says about that is this: listen, I want you to live in such a way that your light will shine before others, so that they see your good deeds, and when they do, they're going to glorify your Father in heaven. There need to be some lights in this world, shining in the darkness, pointing back to God the Father, instead of pointing to all the brokenness in this world around us. And again, tough teachings, but if you trust Jesus, listen to him, even when his teachings seem difficult, even when his teachings are difficult or seem to turn your world upside down. Now, here's the thing in all of this. I do think part of the point of the Sermon on the Mount was to show us just how far we really are from the heart of God and to bring us to a place of humility. Blessed are the poor in spirit, and in that is this idea of humility. This reflection, this honest reflection upon our broken lives, upon the state of brokenness, the brokenness of humanity and the brokenness of this world. It's to bring us to where we see just how far we are from what Jesus really wants for us. And so as we walk through these teachings, and as we're challenged by the difficult nature of these teachings, I don't think that Jesus would want to leave any of us disheartened by the words that he spoke. In fact, what Jesus is trying to do is not break down your heart, but to build up your heart as he gives us these difficult teachings and a better way of living. And so I think there's got to be a question at some point in time, and maybe you're wrestling with this question and you're asking, where's the grace in that? I mean, it's so difficult. This teaching, they seem so rigid. Where's the grace in that? And let me say that with Jesus, we know there's grace. So even when Jesus gives a difficult teaching, we know that his heart was full of grace for the people who he gave that difficult teaching. I mean, think about the rich young ruler. He says, listen, here's what I need you to do. You're lacking one thing. We see in that story that Jesus looked at that rich young ruler and loved him. Those are the words. He looked at him and loved him, knowing what he was missing. There was grace. There was love. The reality is, even with these difficult teachings, there's grace and there's love. Let me show you one reason why I know, and this is where we'll finish. In the Old Testament, there was this king named David. And he's called the man after God's own heart. But the man after God's own heart sometimes had a heart problem himself. He sometimes had a heart problem. His heart was not always pure. So one day he's up in his palace, built at the highest point in Jerusalem, and he's looking down over the rest of the city, and he sees a woman bathing. And there's lust in his heart. And he calls this woman into his palace, finding out that she's a married woman, and he commits adultery with her. And then chases that much further down the road and actually has her husband killed. I mean, things were really off in David's heart. And there comes a time when he comes to his senses. Now, what you might think is after that much sin that God's just going to look at David and say, sorry, bud, you've gone too far this time. But God works through a prophet named Nathan to gently restore David. And it's out of that restoration, because again, there's grace here, that David prays these words. And so if you're looking at your life, I'm going to show you these words in just a second. If you're looking at your life and you're feeling like, man, I've blown it on the whole pure heart thing. I've blown it in other ways as well. I've just really messed up. I want you to see these beautiful words written by King David, who really blew it and messed up, that are now part of our Bible, I think, to show us the path back to the heart of God, when in our hearts we've blown it. Here's what David says in Psalm 51. He says this, he says, "Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew," because it was broken, "renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence." In other words, saying, I know that the impurity of my heart and my actions has put a barrier between you and me. But don't cast me from your presence, God, or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and grant me a willing spirit, again, the desire to chase after you again, God, to pursue you with all of my heart, to once again be the man after your own heart. Grant me a willing spirit to sustain me, to see me through. I think this is where the way back begins, as Jesus is challenging us in difficult ways. The reality is, he's challenging us, and we've all fallen short. He's not just challenging us so that he can look at us and point out our shortcomings. He's challenging us because he wants to call us back to the place where God is, waiting to receive each and every one of us. And so I'm going to end by praying this prayer this morning. And again, we can all bow our heads just for a minute. Or if you need to, if you want to pray along with me, you can keep your head up and you can see these words. But I'm going to pray this prayer for myself, and if you need to pray this prayer for yourself as well right now, won't you do that in this moment? Let's pray together. God, this morning I want to ask that you would create in me a pure heart. God, I begin by confessing that my heart is not always pure. In fact, often it's not pure. And you're the one who can create a clean heart. You're the one who can also renew a commitment, a steadfast spirit within me. God, I ask that you don't cast me out of your presence. I ask that you don't do that with any of us, that you don't cast us out of your presence. That even though, God, we have built up barriers between ourselves and you, that you would be the one to break those barriers down as you come running after us. God, I ask as well that you would not take your Holy Spirit from us. We need him leading and guiding and working to continue to convict us. God, again, we just acknowledge we can't do this on our own. God, we ask as well that you would renew in us the joy of our salvation, that you would restore that to us, because it's when we see the beauty of your salvation, that gift to us, that it encourages us to run with more faithfulness. Give us the willing spirit, God, to be chasing after you, just like you're chasing after us. God, we acknowledge this world is a broken place. And that many times we fall into the trap of that brokenness. But we also see you as the one who can heal us, the source of healing. So God, come and create within us. Come and create within me a pure heart as we take your words, Jesus, seriously. This we pray in your name, Jesus. And the church said, amen. Well, again, for this month, we're calling We're calling you, I'm calling me, we're calling ourselves into following Jesus more seriously as we ask the question, what if? I pray that you'll ask that question and see what he reveals to you.